And so what we're going to do in this show is we are going to give you a DIA style analysis of the players, of the lineup, of how the board is stacked, and be showing you guys how unbelievably stupid our leaders are being right now, and how they are pushing us to the brink of Armageddon as a country. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what exactly we could do about that to save ourselves here.
Yeah, I mean, in a situation like this, obviously, if they're going to try to pop off a world war, they're going to try to get allies. They're going to people to get, to join the United States in this insane world war. I mean, what does that look like?
So I provided some maps here. And so the first map I want to pull up is BRICS. So this is BRICS before the Ukraine situation. BRICS stands for Brazil, India, Russia, China, and South Africa. So essentially, these are countries that are major countries, solid population, solid natural resources, and they're trying to create a competing economic bloc, a competing economic world order to the United States and Britain-centered one that we have right now. And so, as we can see, like the two biggest, most formidable militaries, China and Russia, are now on the same side. India, which has a massive, massive population, is on their side. And the biggest country in South America that is plush with natural resources is also on their side.
Wow.
So a lot of people say, oh, the world is united against Russia and this Ukraine thing, and we're just going to get them. And they talk about, oh, if China tries to take one, the world will sanction them. And they will just be crushed, and they'll have, uprising in their country because it will get so bad economically. So I'm here to show you the real facts of that, and just how much this war in Ukraine has not only not united the world in our favor, it's actually aligned them against us. So this map you're seeing here, BRICS before Ukraine, and now this is BRICS after Ukraine.
Wow.
So as you can see, this is quite a change, and a bunch of other key, very important countries to the geostrategic picture of the United States are now they're getting drawn into the Chinese and Russia world order orbit. And that includes countries such as Saudi Arabia, which is the pillar of our petrodollar, right? The fact that they force everyone to buy their oil in dollars is really what helps prop up our money. There's countries like Egypt that hosts the most important geopolitical choke point in the world, called the Suez Canal. Most of the trade going back and forth between the East and the West goes through that Suez Canal. And so controlling Egypt throughout history has been a prime directive of every single empire. Every single empire wants to control Egypt because that's like the gateway between the East and the West. And controlling that trade is the economic engine that can power empires.
Wow.
We see Turkey on that list. We see even Mexico on that list. Oh no, right? So a lot of people in the world, a lot of countries in the world, they are very sick of our nonsense, and they are moving faster than ever towards a new world order led by China and Russia.
Insane.
So huge problem for us. So as the spring offensive ramps up, right? I personally am not super worried about China or Russia, especially China, intentionally trying to pop off a war. But if we remember back to the Gulf of Tonkin, if we remember a lot of the false flag bases for a lot of the times these other wars have been started, the United States will pretend that they attacked us, and that will be the essentially green light that allows things to go hot. And so China, I think they are on a trajectory to surpass us. They are drawing tons of people into their economic orbit. They have everything to gain by just letting things play out, keeping the peace, letting the United States descend into chaos and kind of like rule itself out on its own. But if they are attacked, if there's a false flag, if things go really south in Russia, they will defend themselves, right? And we got to not kid ourselves about that. And in this presentation, we're going to show you just how much in a good position they are to defend themselves. So if things do pop off, if things do go hot, if, say, like what happened in Poland, where they said, oh, a missile flew out of the battlefield and went into Poland, and now Poland is, hopped up. Poland's getting bucked. Poland's trying to declare war. Or any other country that is on the borders there. That could dramatically escalate things. So if we look at the European map here and our NATO allies, we have to be realistic about history, right? Before World War II, there was a lot of agreements in writing, right? And there's a lot of, oh, I'm your ally, I'm this. But the truth is, when the bullets start flying, everything on paper is out the window, and countries are operating it ruthlessly in their own pragmatic self-interest there. So if we look at this and we're like, oh, all our NATO allies would be on our side. Think about it, if you're a country like Latvia, Estonia, Bulgaria, one of these tiny countries right on the border of Eastern Europe, are you really going to be down to have your country be the host of the front lines of the next world war? Do you really want your entire country to be flattened in that world war? Absolutely not. So a lot of these countries, they joined with NATO because they felt like, oh, this is the big dog on the block, and worst case scenario, they'll protect us. In this case, they would look at the calculus we're about to show here, and they would be like, I know this says this on paper. I know we're supposed to be on your side, but yeah, right, dude, we're out. We are out. We're not getting flattened into a world war. And this is not our beef. We're not going to do this, right? We have no ability to wage this war. So a lot of these countries in the Eastern Europe would surrender or declare neutrality. They'd be like, no way, we're out. Not going to happen. Absolutely not. So as you can see, the line would go behind Turkey, right? So Turkey is completely surrounded in this situation. And even if it wasn't this security self-interest, Turkey has been drifting towards BRICS already. As this war in Ukraine broke out, Turkey's not happy about how things are going down. Turkey's not happy about these sanctions. And Turkey is aggressively moving to get out of NATO and to move towards BRICS. So obviously all the countries around Turkey would be on the other side. Turkey's economic self-interest at this point is with BRICS. They're tired of the CIA messing with their currency. They're tired of being treated as a little pawn on the front lines against our enemies here. And they want their independence. And one of the reasons they contributed to the war in Syria was Erdogan, he campaigns, he tries to stoke this nostalgia of the great empire, the great late Ottoman Empire, right? He wants to rebuild that to the degree possible. And so they got Turkey into Syria, got them to go arm a bunch of terrorists, and got them to do a bunch of stuff that they wouldn't normally do by promising them, hey, you could have the top piece of Syria where the Kurds are at if you back us up here. And that was a pretty compelling offer to them. But as we see, as the board is shifting, as China goes in and negotiates a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, what if on the table here was, hey, Turkey, tell you what, if you leave NATO and you join BRICS in this situation, you will get along better with your neighbors of Saudi Arabia and Iran. And tell you what, Iraq was created after World War I. It's a totally arbitrary, made up thing by the West. The people in this country, they have these competing groups that never get along. So this country was a bad idea in the first place. These borders don't make sense. And so tell you what, Turkey, we will chop off the top part of Syria, or top part of Iraq, excuse me. The part with a lot of oil, where Mosul is, that is held by the Kurds here, that you guys really don't like, and we will give that to you. The southwestern part of Iraq, the Sunni tribal regions, we'll give that to you, Saudi Arabia. And tell you what, Iran, Baghdad and the Shia parts of southeastern Iraq, we'll break that off and give that to you. Every single one of those countries will be like, oh, deal, right? So they are all moving. Really important people to us, like Turkey and Saudi Arabia, are moving actively into this orbit over here, this competing economic world orbit.
Wow.
So next we look at Africa. And if you look at Africa, if you look at their trade, they do way more trade with China in Africa than they do with us. So if you were, running a small business and you had one customer that you got 80% of your money from and one customer that you got 20% of your money from, and those customers are fighting and you have to pick a side, whose side are you going to pick? It's very clear, right? It's a very clear economic self-interest here. Another aspect is that a lot of countries in North Africa, many of them are the ex-French colonies, or I should say current French colonies. They still have these crazy rules where they have this colonialism light thing, this thing where they are legally required to hold the gold and precious metal reserves backing their currencies in the French central bank. They're legally required to give French state companies priority access to their minerals and their oil and their natural resources. So they have been bristling about this for a long time, and they just haven't been powerful enough because the French will send the Foreign Legion to come kill their leaders if they try to get away from this. So for them, perfect opportunity to reset the rules, to rewrite the game here, and to move into a separate economic orbit that's not going to abuse them as much.
Right.
If we look at the whole of Africa and look at some of the infrastructure being built by China there in the past few years, China has been really helping them develop their continent, right? They have tons of people, they have tons of natural resources, and they've kind of been crushed under the boot of this Western colonialism here for a long time. And so China's helping them get out of that, loaning them the money they need for these projects. And, you know, I think they have no delusions that China is not seeking to draw everybody in their economic orbit. But they look at it, if you listen to the African Union leaders, they look at it as like, okay, we got the USA over here. They'll help us, but their help comes with super high interest rates that choke us out over time. And it comes with a bunch of meddling in our affairs. They'll give us money, but they say, okay, now you have to essentially act as our little pawns in the great game of this world order here. And they don't like that, right? They want to be self-determining. And so while China is coming in and doing the same kind of economic hitman thing that the United States and Britain have been doing for a long time, they are not imposing as many political terms and conditions on these countries, and they like that way better. So this is the African Union conveying that sentiment. They are very sick of being told what to do. They're very sick of not being listened to. And this is the far and away prevailing sentiment on the continent. And this is what would lead them towards the opposing economic world order of the United States should a hot situation break out there. So that's a huge problem. If we look at some other points of leverage here, if we look at water, a lot of wars in history have been fought over water resources. And China in Tibet, they have the mountains in Tibet, and the mountains in Tibet are the sources of the rivers, the primary source of fresh water for like half the world's population. And I think we have a little thing here demonstrating that. Let's check this out. Go ahead. I don't know if we can hear that.
Doesn't seem to be audio.
Has constructed more than 87,000 dams at a rate unmatched in human history. Collectively, they generate 352 gigawatts of electricity, which is more than the capacities of Brazil, Canada, and the United States combined. Now, however, after damming most of its internal rivers, China is looking to dam the major international rivers flowing out from Tibet. Nearly half of the world's human population depends on the Tibetan rivers, and as China taps into the water supply, it is increasingly able to dictate terms to the downstream periphery.
So, as we see here, if you are a smaller, poorer country, if you do most of your trade with China, if they're getting into a war and they're right on your border, and if they could shut off the water if you don't go their way, what are you going to do? It's a very clear choice, both economically and geostrategically, to choose the BRICS, the alternative world economic order to the United States, should things start to go south. And a lot of people, they would be looking at this analysis we're about to show you, and they'd see the writing on the wall, and they're like flags. They blow whichever way the wind does, all else aside. And they say, hey, look, who do we think is going to win this? And that's who probably we're going to want to cozy up to, because that's who's going to get better terms after this all shakes out here. And I think a good conveyor of this sentiment is, we had a clip of Duterte in the Philippines, and he's talking about this. And so we'll see if we can put that up there.
Expected some tough policy.
Do you expect me to fight China? And what? Do I have the cruise missiles to hit them? Do I have the missiles to launch from the sun? So what will happen? It's going to be a massacre.
Powerful.
So, and that's why I like Duterte. He's kind of like a Trump character. He just says whatever's on his mind. And that's him essentially saying, look, you're trying to turn us into your little attack dogs here against China, and we're not going to do it. We can't do it. We're going to get destroyed. And I think Indonesia and a lot of these other people that are surrounding China, that are right in the line of fire there, they feel the same way. If things go hot, they are out, and they are not going to be on our side.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about why that's a problem. Let's talk about the raw numbers here. Our military leaders,
military comparisons.
yes. So a lot of our military leaders, they like to lead us to believe that, oh, we would just destroy anybody in a war and it's no big deal and we're so powerful. But the fact is, how the board is stacked against us now. If this went down, we would not win. We would not be in a good position. And I'm going to show you here just how outnumbered we would be. So if we look at the armies, the world's top armies here, we got China, India, United States, North Korea, Russia, Pakistan. And I asked people, how many of the people on this list would be on our side if shit really did pop off? And they would look on it and they'd say, oh, maybe North Korea or South Korea. And it's like, well, South Korea, as we'll see in a minute, is right in the line of fire. South Korea has no chance of winning. South Korea has North Korean artillery aimed right at the city of Seoul. So they cannot afford to take our side in this war. They would have to declare neutrality. They would have to surrender. There is no chance in hell that if they wanted to survive, doesn't matter how many U.S. troops are there, there is no chance that they could be on our side here. So as we see, all of these numbers out of all of this pretty much would be us versus all of these other people. And so we would be, from an army standpoint, from a mere men standpoint, we'd be outnumbered like 10 to 1. If we move into navies, world's top navies include ships and submarines. China has a bigger navy than us. So does Russia. North Korea would be in there, and I'm sure North Korea would get used as kind of like the cannon fodder to draw our fire so that they could come get us. But how many of the people in the top navies of the world would be on our side? It would be pretty much us versus everyone else. It would be us versus most of them, and some of them would abstain.
Wow.
And as we've seen, if you just Google this, like world's top navies, Google China Navy, and you'll see the military leaders talking about, hey, the people with the biggest navy, like the most ships, usually wins. And in this case, we are vastly outnumbered. If you move into the submarines, they have way more submarines, right? Our ability to project power onto like the Chinese mainland and to fight back should a war break out relies on our carriers and our submarines. And if you look at this, if the people that would be against us, they have way more submarines than us if you combine them, right? We have a lot, but this would not be a good situation. This would not be a walk in the park here. If we look at air forces, right? Oh, we dominate the skies, which is true. We do. But if you look at our air forces versus the other countries' air forces, right? Those other countries combined, they could take our air force, right? And again, you can have better things. And that's what we like to say is like, oh, our technology is way better than China's. But here's the deal. And here's what I've been proving the last few years. China has stolen pretty much all of our technologies. The schematic for the F-35, right? The newest, latest, greatest fighter jet that we had spent all this time and effort developing, that was stolen in like 2 weeks. So they have exactly the schematics they need to build their own 5th generation fighters. And if we saw in that Top Gun movie, they have their own very legit 5th generation fighters, and they have the manufacturing ability, as we'll talk about, to essentially engineer, make way more of those than us. So if you think about in World War II, Germany was way ahead of us. They had better weapons. They had more weapons. And what allowed us to eventually beat them was our manufacturing capacity. If you look at satellites, military-only satellites, right? Oh, U.S. dominates space. We aren't dominating space enough to vastly outnumber them, right? And if you combine the people that would be on our side with the people that wouldn't, it's about even when it comes to military satellites. So this is very troubling, and people got to understand we are nowhere near as ahead as we think we are. Our leaders have been asleep at the wheel for decades, and they are steering us towards a war that is impossible to win.
Wow.
So this is just the traditional military comparisons, just with the numbers. And so let's talk about some new things, some new dynamics added to the picture here that would also be changing the game, that would be revolutionizing the battlefield for us. And the first thing is these Russian nuclear ice-breaking ships. And so for people that don't know, Hillary Clinton and her corrupt CFIUS board, they sold Russia like 20% of the United States uranium supply, the thing you need to make nukes and nuclear reactors. And what Russia did with that was they went and they used it to build this gigantic fleet of these massive nuclear-powered ice-breaking ships. So Russia, for a long time, has been constrained to just a small sliver in the Far East and their access to the ocean through the Black Sea, because a lot of times, most of the year, the North Sea and the Arctic Ocean is frozen over and ships can't get through there. But with this uranium that they got from our corrupt government, they have built up a fleet to where that is no longer a geostrategic hurdle. And they can just, no matter how thick the ice is, truck straight through with these ships and have freedom of navigation in a way and possess this capability to operate in the North Sea that the United States fundamentally does not have. So check out this clip of what these things are. Again, battleship size, nuclear ice breaking ships here, crushing up the ice for those polar bears. I love to tell those lefties, hey, yeah, you've seen all those sad polar bear videos, right? Well, you have Hillary Clinton to thank for that. Who's breaking up the ice in the North Sea on purpose? It's not that climate change is just magically, so much worse than it always was as of like 2 years. It's that there's all these ships actively going and breaking up the ice there because climate change would be in Russia's interest, right? Russia has plenty of land. It's just cold, and it would be nice to them if they had some a little bit warmer. So this gives Russia the capability to come over the North Sea and all of northern Canada, and the center of the North American continent is these flat plains that you could just march troops straight down through the middle of the country and divide us if you so chose. And they have those ice-breaking ships that they could be leading an armada through the ice in a way that we couldn't to make this happen. So if we look at the paradigm of China, how their missile defense systems have developed over the years and their ability to protect their shores and to project power here in the South China Sea, let's look at what it was in the 90s up until now in this next clip.
China's current naval policy is sea denial by means of anti-access area denial systems. These are a variety of missiles, air defenses, and electronic capabilities that can neutralize hostile forces and assets. The PLA Navy has invested vigorously in its anti-access area denial systems. While doing so, it has also developed lethal conventional forces that can exploit the openings their area denial weapons would create. By comparison, in 1996, during the Taiwan Strait crisis, China's area denial weapons weren't even capable of defending its coastline. The PLA Navy's missile arsenal could only reach as far as Taiwan and the US bases in South Korea. By 2003, however, China had expanded its infantry to hundreds of missiles, enough to deter foreign powers away from its coastline. By 2010, its inventory had grown to over 1,000 conventional short-range ballistic missiles. At the same time, it had developed more sophisticated missiles like the DF-21C, with an estimated range of 1,700 kilometers, capable of reaching targets in Japan and the Philippines. By 2017, China had built thousands of conventional medium-range ballistic missiles and hundreds of conventional intermediate-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching as far as Guam. Today, Chinese firepower at sea, complemented by its missile umbrella, is turning the scale in the Pacific.
Wow.
So,
seems like we're in big trouble there.
Yep. So if we look at that last little ring of what those missiles actually were, the ones that shot the farthest, they are these new type of hypersonic weapons. And what are these hypersonic weapons? They are missiles that fly like 5 to 10 times the speed of sound, meaning they don't even need a warhead. They don't even need explosive ordnance at the end of it to be able to destroy an aircraft carrier, because it could just hit it so hard that the kinetic energy alone could take out these carriers. So they fly so fast, our missile defenses can't track them well. China's way ahead of everybody, even acknowledged by our military in the hypersonic development, and we currently have no way to shoot them down. So we have 6 aircraft carriers that, if we try to do that thing and go patrol off their coast as things are heating up here, we have 6 aircraft carriers. They have thousands of hypersonic missiles that we can't stop. Who wins? Who wins? So the other aspect of this war that I really want people to get through their head, if they've seen this movie called All Quiet on the Western Front lately, it's a very great depiction of how much of a bloodbath World War I was. And World War I was a bloodbath because the advent of new technology, of machine guns, of artillery, the armies were not prepared to fight against that kind of stuff, and they just essentially got absolutely lit up and mowed down in every way possible. That kind of a dynamic of new technology changing the battlefield would exist in World War III too, with the advent of this drone war technology. The idea of these drone swarms, these kamikaze drone swarms with a bunch of little bombs attached to them. And I grabbed this clip here from this movie. And this shows these drone swarms, ones that aren't even flying that fast, and how they have the ability to just go target and take people out. And it's really hard to stop, right? Because you could shoot a few of these things down, but how do you stop all of them? So they could take out boats, they could take out planes, they could take out troops spread out, they could take out equipment, right? And China makes all these drones, right? Most of the drones in the world come from China. And so how would we even stop this, right? Our carriers already got lit up by these hypersonics. They have an army of subs to be hunting our submarines, and now they could send these drone swarms after us. This would be, like I said, pure chaos. One of these swarms could wipe out entire battalions of Marines quickly and cheaply. And so in that movie, right, that was an artistic rendition of it. But think about, in that movie, if there was 10 times or 100 times more of those drones, and they were flying at you 10 times as fast. If we look at this little racing drone clip, see what I mean.
Damn.
So that is, imagine like tens of thousands of those things strapped with bombs flying at you that fast, closing on you that fast. You physically don't have the time to respond. And it would just be a gigantic massacre in the same way that those battlefields were in World War I. And so our illustrious military leaders, they tell us, oh, don't worry. We have stuff to handle this. We've been preparing for this. We know what we're doing. Trust us. And to that I say, as people know, my father is part of the military industrial complex here. That would he would be selling Raytheon the software they used to design the computer chips that would go inside some of these weapons. So this is what we would be fielding to try to stop those massive swarms of drones should a conflict break out. This is from Raytheon. So this shows these lasers, direct energy weapons, right? And they can shoot down these drones. They can target and shoot them down relatively quickly. But in their scenarios here, they are simulating for the idea that there's going to be not that many drones, right? If there's like a handful of these, and if they're flying really slow, then our weapons are effective. And they're like, okay, well, now we got this microwave weapon here that could take out a whole group of them. It works more like a shotgun than a sniper rifle, right? It spreads out. But the point is, it still doesn't spread out enough to effectively kill a lot of these drones if they're everywhere. And they still have to be in small groups for that to be effective. Furthermore, every single ship, every single base would have to be outfitted with hundreds and hundreds of these things in order for us to have a flying chance against those drones. And they're just not right now. They are just not. So what we have to try to stop that, to try to push back on that, is wholly inadequate for the massive swarms that would be flying at us, you know, at those racing speeds there. So disastrous prospects for the United States. So again, a big part of their calculus in popping stuff off with China hinges on the fact that they think a bunch of the world would be on our side and would sanction China, and that China's economy would collapse, and that would essentially put enough pressure on China to capitulate eventually. But if we look at the war in Ukraine situation, let's look at how many of these countries, when things are actually getting hot, would be on our side. This is how many countries here, this map of that countries that were on our side as the war in Ukraine was popping off. So they say the world is united against Russia in this, you know, aggression towards Ukraine. But it's like, is it? If you look at this map, is that the world united against Russia and China? I don't think so. That looks like most of the world not going along with this BS anymore. And if you look on our eastern flank there, Turkey is not happy about this. Turkey's thinking about breaking ranks. They're throwing Ukraine in there as if that's some kind of serious thing. But pretty much it would be after the defections of these tiny Eastern European countries, it would be the United States and Western Europe versus everybody else. They would not be on our side. So their fundamental foundation for their calculus here, their war calculus, is flawed, fatally flawed. So we have this massive Pacific fleet, right? Our ability to project power is largely in our Navy here. And so our Pacific fleet, as things heat up in Ukraine and things escalate to a much more belligerent level, China, they want Taiwan, right? They see Taiwan as theirs. They see this as an illegitimate thing, and they are waiting for the perfect opportunity to move on that. And additionally, a lot of people don't know this, but as the war in Syria was breaking out, it wasn't just Russia that was helping Assad in Syria. China was sending them a bunch of weapons and supplies to keep them going too. So China is actively against us in a lot of these situations. And think about the timing right now. So everyone in the West has just depleted tons of their ammo, tons of their missile stocks, tons of their other weapons, sending these things to Ukraine, right? So we're low on ammo. The other thing is, as the gas prices went really high because of the sanctions, Joe Biden depleted a lot of our strategic oil reserves, right? The gas, essentially, we need to power the military in case of an emergency. A lot of that's depleted so that the Democrats could fluff their numbers in this midterm election. So we are low on ammo and low on gas, and things are about to ramp up. And what could we do about it, right? So they would go to take Taiwan as we're weak, and we would send the Pacific Fleet over there. If you look at the Pacific Fleet, it's one of the biggest outfits in our military. Probably over half of our Navy is in the Pacific Fleet. And that contains about 6 carriers and a bunch of other things. But those carriers would be wiped out by those hypersonics very quickly, as would the rest of our stuff. And we would essentially be crippled, and it would be left to the hypersonics. The only thing they couldn't get is the submarines. But how we fight our submarine warfare is we rely on these signals intelligence bases in Australia. And I have a little clip about that here. So that's Pine Gap. They use that for signals intelligence throughout that region of the world. There's this other one as well called the Holt. And this is what they use to track Chinese submarines, right? This is essentially our eyes and ears in that region. And both of these bases are right within striking distance of China could hit them with missiles from the mainland. So they could do 2 missile barrages and essentially take out our eyes and ears in this entire region as they are annihilating our Pacific Fleet. And all of a sudden, we are totally pinned back to our shores, right? If we called for help, they're like, oh, what about our allies? So this thing starts to go south. They try to pop this off, and guess what? Our allies from Western Europe, even if they scrambled ships to come help us, guess what? The Suez Canal is closed. The way you would get over there in any kind of reasonable amount of time frame is through the Suez Canal, and guess what? Egypt's on their side, so that would be closed. We would be choked off, and we would get totally wiped out in that region. Furthermore, if they try to come around the Horn of Africa, South Africa's on their side, and they could shoot at us from there too. And South Africa is very irritated with the West because, as we could see, nonstop for like the past few decades, the West has been trying to destabilize South Africa and ramping up tensions. And South Africa is just a very crazy place right now. So they're really looking to get out of this. If you look at our allies, our staging bases, like Japan, right? We have those big bases in Okinawa. In South Korea, we have those big bases there. In Taiwan and in the Philippines, where we're trying to build military bases. All of those people would have to surrender very quickly because they would get annihilated if they didn't. And so if their choice is keep our promise to the United States or get completely flattened as a country, what are they going to choose? It's an obvious choice. Mm-hmm. Australia and New Zealand, they would be marooned from the rest of the world. And China, after they did this with our Pacific Fleet, after they completely destroyed our Pacific Fleet, they would not want to allow these massive islands to be staging bases as what happened in World War II against Japan. They would not want to allow these islands to be giant staging bases to come regroup and come at them again. So they would make damn sure that they made them capitulate as well. And it's funny, I see people like Kim.com, right? He's down there in New Zealand, and he's like, oh no, the war's about to pop off. Move to New Zealand. It's the only place you're going to be safe. And I chuckle at that because apparently these guys, they don't realize, like, dude, the commander-in-chief of the New Zealand military and of the Australian military is now King Charles, right? So essentially, the leader of your military is someone that they're openly at war with. And by some kind of magical, fantastical thinking, you think that you're not going to be a target if your military is run by somebody they are openly at war with. That is very wishful thinking. And these guys would be occupied very quickly to deny us the ability to go back there and regroup. So also, as all this is happening, right, because the spring offensive is what's the catalyst here in Russia, our banking system would be going through pure chaos, right? So our ability to spend money to rebuild our military here after our Pacific Fleet gets wiped out would be dramatically degraded. So they would be forced to print a bunch of money, a bunch of people are getting away from the dollar, and now we have runaway inflation and chaos going on in the United States. So again, I talked earlier about the economics of this thing, right? And how we did not win World War II because we were so much better, badder, tougher. We did not have as good of weapons. We did not have as many of weapons when the war started out. We did not spend anywhere near as much on our military as the other countries that were belligerents in that war did either. What allowed us to win was our manufacturing capacity. They had better stuff, and we were able to just keep producing so many more things than them, even though they weren't as good, that we were able to eventually just overwhelm them with numbers. So let's look at the manufacturing picture here. If we look at it, these are the world's manufacturing power. So China has, at the moment, double our manufacturing capacity. And if you look at what manufacturing capacity we do have, it's predicated on the fact that we need raw materials from other places, right? So even this 16% that we do have, if we don't have the raw materials we need, that would go way down. China has way more manufacturing workers. If you look at where all the manufacturing workers in the world are, China outnumbers us vastly, right? Them and Russia combined would be about 10 times our size. And many of the other industrial manufacturing kind of bases with people or places with big populations in the manufacturing sector would not be on our side. They would either abstain or they would be on BRICS side here. So our entire Pacific Fleet gets wiped out in this opening skirmish, kicked off by this United States false flag. And so now we have to go rebuild our Navy. And to build a Navy, obviously you need tons of steel. Where does the steel come from? It appears, if you look at the top 10 steel producing countries, that we have near enough steel to rebuild a Navy, let alone sustain our country if all of these other sources were chopped off from us, right? It's not even close. So to build tanks, to build weapons, to build ships, you need a lot of steel. We wouldn't have a lot of steel. If you think about our ammo, right? Because we've been so much ammo to Ukraine, our ammo is depleted. So what do you need for ammo? You need lead. Where does the lead come from in the world? And again, in this situation, Australia has already capitulated, right? They would have to. So we don't have access to the lead we need to replenish our ammo stocks. Huge problem, right? Doesn't matter how many factories we have. If they don't have the lead to make bullets, good luck. The next thing, rubber, right? Industrial machines require rubber. For tires, for pipe fittings, for everything you need a crap load of rubber to fight a war. And where does all of the rubber in the world come from? It appears it comes from places that would not be on our side. So it would be completely choked off of rubber. Finally, aluminum, right? What you need to make planes as planes get shot down, right? Where does the aluminum in the world come from? If you 86 Australia out of there because they would be forced to capitulate, what is our ability to procure aluminum? It looks pretty bleak here. So essentially, our leaders are trying to say, hey, let's go fight a war where we'd be outnumbered 10-1, and let's do it in a way that while we're trying to fight this war, we have no steel, no rubber, no lead, and no aluminum. Good luck building an army. Good luck sustaining the war without any of those natural resources. It's impossible. So it is absolutely preposterous for them to think that this would go well for us in any way, right? And we are already deeply divided as a country, and this would be pure chaos. So a lot of people, and this is kind of the thinking that has been conditioned here into us as a population, is we view these wars, these foreign wars, based on our experience over time here, as like this abstract thing that it's far away. It doesn't really affect our day-to-day life much. But this would be completely different, right? This would be, look, all of the clothes that we get, that's cut off. So no new clothes for a while. All of the semiconductors come from Japan, South Korea. They come from Taiwan, right? And our electronics a lot of times are manufactured in China. So think about no new clothes, no new electronics. The automobile factories are converted into war factories, so no new cars. We would have food rations, right? This would be a like crazy situation like we have never ever dealt with before in the United States here. And it would cause tons and tons of social unrest. Or how about this? In World War II, during World War II, they had raised tax rates to 90%. The top tax bracket was 90%, and taxes were due 4 times a year, right? How would that go over here? And this is the thing: everyone sees them hiring 87,000 IRS agents. Is that because they just, want to raise taxes slightly? Do you need 87,000 armed agents to just do a slight tax raise? Or do you need that to prepare for a war where you're planning on burying everyone in tax that they will be absolutely outraged at paying? So if you look at some of the other factors, our electric grid would get lit up. Our electric grid is very soft, very centralized, and very sketchy. And we would have rolling power outages everywhere constantly if this thing pops off. Our food supply has been getting squeezed. So during wars, if you go back and look at some of those videos during World War II, especially in Britain, there's food rations, right? So you have a family of 4. Okay, this week, family of 4. That means you get 8 eggs. You get this many pounds of meat. You get 1 stick of butter. You get this. Like, that is how it would go, because our supply chains would be everything directed towards fighting this full-scale war right here. So it would be conditions like we have never, ever seen before in the United States here. The other thing, as this situation has ramped up in Ukraine, I believe it was a few months ago, there was a bunch of papers running these headlines. They think they're so tough and cool. CIA is going to activate these sleeper cells inside Russia to conduct these sabotage operations against food, against factories, against all this stuff. And for a lot of people that don't know, the precursor to the CIA, OSS, they were not much about gathering intelligence. They were about blowing shit up, sabotaging things, and killing people, right? Because during a total war, your intelligence agencies are operationalized more into cloak and dagger paramilitary forces than they are just doing intelligence over here. So as we said, hey, we're going to go do these sleeper cells, activate them, and go after Russia, guess what started happening? What started happening was trains started derailing. Food factories started burning down. All this chaos and mayhem. There's been hundreds. Look it up. And so people don't get, this is not Iraq or Afghanistan that you're threatening here, right? These are serious countries. And if you guys send agents to go do this to them, they're going to send agents to come do this to us. And it's going to be easy to get in because our borders are wide open, right? So the flip side of that, if we try to go do that to China, right, try to degrade at some of their manufacturing advantage here on us, how are we going to do that? They have this massive surveillance system where they can see every single nook and cranny of something that's happening. They are about as hardened and ready for battle as you could possibly be in that country, right? And so a lot of people look at the social credit system and the mass surveillance apparatus as like, oh, this is an ideological thing of social control because they're communists. And they don't get no, dude, this is them preparing for a war where they're expecting a bunch of agents to be activated in their country to come try and sabotage them. So they're ready. They're completely ready for it. Good luck with that.